Hello and welcome to the RevOps Show. Another hot topic we've seen circulating recently is that of performance management. Today, Doug and Jess are breaking it down into three categories: coaching, training, and managing. Yes, I know, these terms all seem to get used interchangeably, but no, they are actually quite different. Doug will give us more of a breakdown starting right now.
Jess.
Hi, Doug.
Wow, I didn't expect that.
I know. I was trying to throw you off a little bit.
I know you did. You did. It's we're recording it on a Tuesday morning.
We are.
Second Tuesday.
It is second Tuesday because we have no Mondays. Second Tuesday.
So, how's your week, Jess?
Great week.
I'm sure all of our listeners
I know.
are
so
in...
last week was spring break, which is interesting. It's always interesting because I had both of my kids home for a week, and then our week back started with one kid with strep throat, and now we have two children with strep throat, which is going to make the recording that much more interesting as well. So
yeah, I'm confused actually now that I think about it. Just I don't know why I didn't think about it before, but so they were home last week for the most part, right?
They were. And they chose not to get sick last. And
no, but I mean,
realize I'm framing this as a choice, but it's not.
But wouldn't like going to the biological lab called school for your petri dishes? Wouldn't that be where they would? One would think,
but no, they picked it up while doing spring break things. So
see, your kids are smart. Because if they had gotten sick before spring break and were sick during spring break, they would have lost their spring break. But here, you could kind of look at it through an angle that they're really just kind of extending their spring break.
Their spring break, yeah.
I mean,
it's true. They figured out a way to game the system, apparently.
You're raising wise children, Jess. You should be proud of that.
Super proud. Keeping me on my toes 24/7. They are.
You know it's 9 days from today, Jess.
Are you seeing Bruce 9 days from today?
Oh my gosh, no! I'm seeing Bruce 6 days from today. We're saving that one for.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Show that we're doing later.
For Friday. Okay, gotcha. No, what's 9 days from today?
Opening day, Jess.
Oh, pitchers and catchers. Oh wait, no, that's spring training.
Pitchers and catchers. Oh my gosh,
Report.
Jess.
I'm tired.
Jess, you need to call the doctor. You need to go to urgent care. There's something wrong with you.
There clearly is, but you forget that right now there is no other sport for me but basketball. So we're in the midst of March Madness. So
how's Kentucky doing? Hey, you brought it up, Jess.
I did. I knew they weren't going to go far, so I'm fine. Go Kansas State.
What is that, like a Ted Lasso thing?
No, I always root for whoever. Once they're out, I always root for whoever knocked them out. Kansas State knocked them out.
Oh, that's a horrible approach.
Well, that is my approach.
Is that because you work through this thing that if the team that beat your team wins,
100%.
And if your team had won,
the logic is sound. Yes.
No, but I get. But Jess, you've always struck me as someone that enjoys revenge a little bit more than that.
That is true.
You struck me as a relatively vengeful person.
Usually, but not in this instance. I was the biggest. I think it was Virginia. It was either Virginia or Virginia State who knocked them out a couple of years ago. I was the biggest Virginia fan that year.
I'm pretty sure it had to have been Virginia because I don't even think there's such a thing as
Probably
Virginia
not.
State.
Probably not. Virginia.
And if there is, they're definitely not D1.
Yeah. So Virginia, I was the biggest Virginia fan that year.
So good news for you then. Rick Pitino got hired. He's at St. John. So back in New York City.
He's a hot commodity no matter what, apparently.
So, I mean, you have to admit you've been on both ends of the extreme about Rick Pitino.
I have, but I was younger and dumber when I was a Pitino fan because I was a kid. I mean, so
the only reason you don't like Rick Pitino is that he left Kentucky.
Yeah, I mean that's part. Well, so he didn't just leave Kentucky. He left to Kentucky and went to one of their main rivals.
No, he didn't. He left Kentucky to go to Boston.
To the pro. No, I'm familiar with the history.
Right, so it's not like he left Kentucky to go to.
He left though, and then went because he couldn't cut it in the NBA, and then went to one of Kentucky's arch rivals.
I mean,
So
just so you're
Kentucky
clear,
fans,
Rick Pitino is every bit the cheater at Kentucky that he was.
here we go. Here we go.
I'm talking about Rick Pitino.
I'm aware. I'm aware that's who you're talking about right now. Give it a minute, and then we'll move on to Calipari.
Oh, so you admit that Calipari is it?
No.
Well, of course you know he's a cheater. There's proof.
Oh, Lord have mercy.
University of Massachusetts. Anyways, but it's New Year's in 9 days.
In 9 days.
Do you know what's happening tonight?
No.
U.S. Japan.
Okay.
World Baseball Championship. Japan beat Mexico last night in walk-off.
Who are you rooting for? Who do you think's going to win?
I'm rooting for Japan.
You're rooting for Japan?
Who am I rooting for? What? You know, Jess, I've always been a fan of the Asian baseballers.
Oh, this has gone real sideways now. Wow.
Of course I'm rooting for the U.S. U.S. is defending their championship, defending their title.
I was just curious.
Although I have to admit that watching it also makes me sad, though.
Why?
Trey Turner is raking.
Sorry.
He's with the Phillies now.
Yeah, somewhere. Sorry.
I think about who my Nationals used to be. Just makes me sad. You know what, Jess? We better talk about something that'll brighten me up. So what are we talking about today?
Today we're going to talk about performance management.
Different from all others. Sorry.
Wow. Okay, performance management and are we good?
I'm great.
Okay. Today we're talking about performance management and the difference between managing, training, and coaching.
Sounds like a good topic, Jess. So that was giving us a lot of thought.
It was your topic.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Thought it was good.
Must be why I like the topic so much.
Must be. So let's start with what is performance management?
Well, I think what I'm categorizing it under, like I'm categorizing the three things under the idea of, we're managing, training, coaching is all about managing the performance of people. So, I mean, I would say performance management is, am I allowed to use the words in their definition?
In their definition? Sure.
I mean, it's all about managing the performance of people. It's an interesting thing because I am I believe in good arts law. Mm-hmm. Good measure loses its goodness when it becomes an objective. I'm a big believer in have a good at bat. Never focus on getting up and getting a hit. But I also see, there's the other side of the fence, which is at some point you do have to get hits.
Right.
And if you're not getting hits, it either means you're not having good at bats, or, and this is possible, everybody, you can have a good at bat for you. And like, if I had a really good at bat for me, if I ever had a chance to play upper level professional baseball, like if my bat could touch the ball before it hit the catcher's mitt, as a matter of fact, I probably would have a better chance making contact with the ball, hitting it when the catcher is throwing it back to the pitcher than when it's being thrown to the catcher, just to be, I mean, at least I'm honest, right?
Right.
Yeah. So it is about managing performance, but it's also about, I hear those terms frequently get used either synonymously. What the, yes. I said synonymously. Yes, that's right.
Yes, you were right. You were right.
See, I'm used to doing this show in the afternoon, Jess. My neurons are not fully connected on a Tuesday morning. Isn't there a song Tuesday morning?
I don't know. There's a store Tuesday morning.
I recall some like folk song or something Tuesday morning. Anyways, yeah. So I hear the words used interchangeably, or they're just used ambiguously, and I think it's I think it's important that people understand what they mean. Yes, Tuesday morning. It's a song by the Pogues.
The Pogues.
The Pogues. I'm sorry. My eyes can't read my screen. The Pogues. Yes, there you
go. So you're saying you see coaching, managing, and training used interchangeably? Because I don't think training gets thrown in there as interchangeably as like coaching and managing definitely get used.
Well, it's probably that coaching and managing often get used together, and coaching and training are often.
Okay.
I mean, I would agree that probably we're not confusing training with managing, though I would actually say that managing has more in common with training than it does with coaching. How about that? How's that for a hot take?
I'm processing that. I actually agree with you. I agree with you. So let's kind of unpack each one individually. So let's start with coaching. What is coaching?
Wow, I didn't expect that you were going to start with coaching. I was totally not prepared to start.
Do you want to start with managing?
Yeah, let's start with managing.
Okay.
Because so much of my definitions, I realize, were as much about contrasting.
Okay, let's start with managing.
So managing is primarily about accountability.
Okay.
It's about accountability. It's about clarity, and it might be about advice. So, like when you're doing a pipeline review, a pipeline review is fundamentally different if it's viewed through the lens of, am I doing this as a manager? Or am I doing this as a coach?
Okay.
So if I'm managing you, I'm looking at accountability, which to some degree is I'm looking at compliance. And this is not compliance in the negative sense of compliance. It's, Are you doing the things that you're supposed to be doing? Are you following the methodology? I see a lot, we did an episode on methodology earlier, and Lord knows it seems to be that methodology is becoming the hot thing. And the number of methodologies that are being created now is beginning to blow me away. What I oftentimes see missing is, part of managing is managing to what the methodology is supposed to be, right? So are you doing the things we're supposed to be doing? Where are we, potentially suggesting, working maybe even collaboratively on sales strategy, et cetera. But it's primarily, again, about accountability, clarity. So another element is clarity, and there's a support element. Do you have what you need? And a large part of a manager's job in managing salespeople is being able to speak for the sales organization, for their sales team up.
Right.
So there very much is about a translating, initiatives from above. So there's clarity at the point of execution and feedback at the point of execution to those setting the agenda.
I'm glad you brought that up on clarity, because I was going to ask you for clarity on that. But that, yep. So it's communicating both ways. On compliance, you said, compliance not in the negative sense. So what is when you say negative sense, what do you mean by that?
Well, the negative sense of compliance is very gotcha, and it's about catching. I mean, too often compliance gets manifested in a way of catching people doing things wrong, and it's about process for the sake of process, or methodology for the sake of methodology. Good compliance is understanding the spirit of. What is the purpose of this? Are we violating, so when I was in financial services, I had to deal with compliance on a legal basis. And most people in my role, well, let's just say they were not fans of compliance. But I actually talked about that. I actually loved compliance. And I loved them for two reasons. One is they kept me out of jail, and I really did appreciate that. Because I can tell you, left to my own devices,
sure,
I would have stretched what I wanted to say to a point that I would have probably violated some regulation or law or something. Yeah. But the other thing was they actually made me more creative, because I couldn't take the easy route. So for example, in financial services and financial advisory, you can't promise or allude to promises of performance. So I couldn't talk about, working with us will give you peace of mind. I couldn't say something like that.
Okay.
Right? Because it might not.
Right.
Right. And peace of mind alludes to the fact that you're not going to have to worry about downside performance, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
So I had to really get creative, right? So like one of my positioning statements that worked very well for the people that I was working with, imagine a financial strategy that you are totally comfortable with and you spend less than 2 hours per quarter paying attention to it.
Okay.
Right? Because I worked with people who wanted to delegate,
Right.
to manage their finances. They wanted to think about other things. And like one of the things that I used to talk about was every one of my clients knew when the beginning of the month was. Or actually they knew about when the 5th of the month was. And the reason is their mailbox was filled with financial statements. And then they had to open up all their financial statements and they had their spreadsheets that pulled them all together. Then there became, and it's like, no, we're going to have this. It's going to be reported to you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I had to think about those things. Now, when I first came up with that, compliance rejected.
Okay.
Right. And I said, well, whoa, wait a second. Right. Why are we rejecting it?
Right.
Right. Well, they said, well, you can't promise performance. I said, I'm not promising performance. Right. They said, well, comfort in first performance. Well, hold on. Let's talk about what comfort is.
Right.
Right. And so, and they, as we worked through it, they realized, oh, okay, yeah. Right. So, but by the way, I'm not talking about that compliance. I'm not talking about compliance from the league when I'm not talking about it from the legal
not the legal
standpoint.
compliance. Yeah.
What I'm talking about is, if we have a methodology, so let's say someone's implementing MEDDIC, right? Are we doing that? For us, exit criteria, like we don't have a methodology per se. We use ANA, which is again not really a methodology. All these abbreviations are not really a methodologies; they're definitions of qualification. But that notwithstanding, like, hey, are we doing the things we're supposed to be doing? One of the reasons that we take the approach to exit criteria that we take is don't miss steps, right? So what I'm looking at is, as you're doing the things that you're doing, are we following the methodology? If we're not following the methodology, part of my job is to find out why are we not finding the methodology. Maybe the methodology is not appropriate. Maybe there's something that's going on. By the way, if I'm managing you and you're not following the methodology, that's an item potentially for coaching. Right. Which we'll get into a little bit later. But so that's what I mean by compliance.
Yeah, and it's a fine line on being able to manage that and not go kind of negative on it. It sounds like.
Well, yeah. Wow, you got me stumped here. So, like, I don't think you go negative. But, in my coaching days, I could tell, and I remember there was a year I was involved, and I think the coach really influenced it. We really began to not like our team. We did not like our players, is what, and there was a work ethic, there was a resilience, there were some other things that, and I started realizing that everything we were doing was coming from a place that we just didn't really like this team. And I knew, like, once I realized that, I'm like, okay, we're shot. It was the worst performance. It was probably the most talented team that we had in the years that I coached. But, certainly relatively speaking, it performed the worst. And look, I've been involved in organizations. I've been involved as a manager where I found myself not liking my players.
Right.
That's negative. Right? When you do that, that's where you're going negative. The thing that I worry about when we talk about negative is, there's two sides. There's two sides. There's positivity. There's negativity. To only use one is a mistake. There's friction and reduced friction. To only use one, there's promoting elements and inhibiting elements. To only use one set of tools is a mistake. And so I don't believe that people don't improve out of fear. But if I didn't realize that touching a hot stove hurt, I'd be in a lot of trouble. And actually, there is I forget what the condition is called, but it's a condition where you don't feel pain. And sometimes we think about how cool would that be? Except you burn your hand and you don't even know that your hand's burning.
Right.
You break bones and you don't know and so you don't get that negative stimulus back to help guide behavior. So when you're talking about accountability, yeah, there's going to be negative. Yeah, there's going to be frustration. So I, yeah, there's going to be a little bit of pain. So like, I don't want to say that, to a large degree, again, that can't be the basis. And Lord knows I've seen pipeline reviews just become absolute, hey, how can you make us feel a little bit shittier than we do right now?
Right.
But again, I think that I just want to be careful that the takeaway is not,
okay.
Don't be negative. Now, I think when we get to talking about coaching,
Mm-hmm.
I think coaching can't be negative.
Okay.
And actually what is more dangerous than the difficulty of going negative is it is a really fine line between managing someone and coaching someone.
Okay. All right. So let's talk next about training. So what are kind of the key pieces of training, and what does that look like?
So training is teaching new skills, or refining. I mean, training is fundamentally a teaching element.
Okay.
Or it could be there could be drills that you're running, if you will, that is a training element as you're kind of building the psychological muscle memory of different aspects or pieces. So, way back we used to do mock situations of already we've got a client, they've got a last minute we need to put this and this together, and we've got 90 minutes to do it, right? And so it was a practice, so we could do that. That's an example of a training element where it's not necessarily teaching per se or teaching a skill,
right?
It's building in that repetition, but fundamentally it's a teaching piece. The other thing too is training is an event.
Okay. What do you mean by that?
So we do training.
Yep.
Sales training, it's not quite as big of a myth as it used to be, but hey, we do sales training once a year. I don't understand why our sales team's not getting better. And my joke is, what do you call a day of sales training? And some people say a waste of time. And I think that's offensive personally, because really what it is entertainment. And I think entertainment is not a waste of time. Right? Because if you have a really good trainer, they come in, they share some things, they tell some jokes.
Right.
We feel better about things that we're doing. And by the way, you know what? For the first few weeks after training, you'll typically see a performance improvement. Right. But then the performance improvement disappears. Why do you see the performance improvement? Because you paid attention to something. Right. Wherever you pay your attention, you will see improvement, at least in the short term. Right. It's the sustaining element. So where training is good, especially from a sales context and from a performance management context, is it's a great way to launch something. Mm-hmm. It's an event to get started. Okay. Here's right.
Yep.
It can also be good to finish something.
What do you mean by that?
It's a way to complete it. Okay. Hey, so, we're implementing a new approach. We're doing whatever. So there's a training so there's a big element of training in the beginning, and there's a big element of training at the end, with some aspects of training in between. And the aspects of training. So like there's a time where I go into the batting cage where I'm working on my repetitions, and I'm working on, just keeping everything dialed in, because, if you go a day without swinging a bat in baseball, you're going to lose your swing. Mm-hmm. There's also an element where I'm in the cage where I'm working off of something, and I'm working on, getting my hands in or something like that. That works more of training, because what we're trying to do is teach the feel of something. It's not a real situation. Right. Because again, with training, there's a context of, I know what's coming. It's not in this, but what it does is it begins to give me hey, that's what this looks like. That's what this feels like. Training is only as effective as the mechanisms of follow-up. And I would say your training effectiveness is going to be driven probably more by the level and quality of your coaching than anything else. Okay. And by the way, if you have quality coaching, what you'll begin to see is that how you think about and how you approach training will change radically as well.
All right. So that's a great segue into coaching. What is coaching?
If you give a man a fish, Jess, you feed him for a night. If you teach him to fish, so coaching is teaching to fish. Coaching is facilitating. Over and above everything, it is facilitating the thought process and the approach so that one develops the capacity to do on their own or to do without oversight. Maybe it's a team, so it wouldn't be on their own. Right. So one of the things I always talk about, the difference between coaching and consulting is taking advantage of experience in an area, understanding the situation and utilizing that experience to provide an answer, to provide direction. Coaching is enabling someone to find the answer within themselves. Now, one of the difficulties where I see coaching applied poorly is if you don't have the basis, if you don't have the experience, if you don't have the knowledge to have that answer, then coaching can create a lot of problems, right? Because I can enable you to confidently come to an answer that you have no basis for having confidence in, but you'll now have a lot of confidence in it. Now look, sometimes when I'm coaching or sometimes when someone is coaching, one of the elements, and I would say this is especially true in a sales process, in a sales organization for performance, is I'm going to coach you and you're going to come to the wrong answer, right? I'm going to coach you through a process of, so what do you think we should do here? And you're going to decide that we should do something. And I'm like, oh my God, that's just stupid. By the way, I'm thinking that to myself. If I'm managing, I might say, oh my God, that's just stupid. I mean, I shouldn't say that, but I might say that. But if I'm coaching, I can't say that. Right. Because if, you remember this because you actually worked at a client where I gave this very specific advice. And I said, I'm going to change his name to Bill. Okay. Bill, when you hire this salesperson, here's the thing. He's going to be handling this sale and you're going to see him doing something that is absolutely the wrong thing to do.
Yep.
Every impulse in you is going to be correct his action or take it over because you don't want to lose this sale. And it is in that moment that you will either create the opportunity for him to be a great salesperson for you or destroy it. If you correct his action, he will never be a great salesperson for you. If you don't, he has the opportunity to be a great salesperson for you. If you must, what you should do is write down the time, the issue, what he's doing, why you know it's wrong, put it in an envelope, address it to you, send it in the mail so it's postmarked. And then when the sale gets lost, you can go, yeah, I knew that was going to happen. Well, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Well, remember when, right? Because if I correct you and you come to this conclusion, then you're never going to believe it, right? You're going to believe that you're right. Okay. You're just, whatever. And by the way, if what I do wins, and by the way, remember, you can do the right thing and lose. So just because my impulse is to correct somebody,
right.
And I could be absolutely right. And by the way, in an interaction like a sale, like a complex sale, there is no such thing as I was right.
Right.
100 other things happen. But that person is going to go, oh yeah, but I would have pulled it out. Of course I would have figured that out, et cetera, et cetera. So there really is no learning. So if you think about it, training is teaching, coaching is building the capacity to learn.
Okay.
And if you think about it, a lot's written about, the school system in the US at least. And I think there's other places as well. And in my opinion, the biggest flaw in the school system today is it's still, we teach it's training. It's all training. We're teaching a rote element, right? As opposed to what we really need to teach today. And especially if you think about, with the development of chat GPT-4 and things like that, what we really need to teach is how can you learn? How do you learn? How do you approach a new situation? How do you come, the capacity, if you've learned how you learn, if you've learned how to learn, then you'll never be somewhere where you're absolutely stuck.
Well, so it's interesting because I'm heavily in that theory a lot because I have a daughter who's in gifted and talented program. And if you go in that classroom,
I was like, was that a humble
it
brag?
looks-
Is that a little soft?
it
Is
was
that a little
not.
soft?
I promise you.
My daughter's talented and gifted.
I promise you, it wasn't.
I know.
If you go in that classroom, it looks like chaos. Because I've gone in there in the middle of the day. It looks like chaos. It looks like the kids are like, the inmates are running the asylum and they're doing all kinds of weird stuff and they're running back and forth and they're basically doing these self-managed projects. And there's not, I mean, there's a curriculum, but it's not a curriculum in the sense of what we're used to. And I had this whole conversation with the teacher and I was like, okay, so you're pulling her out for 3 hours a week and they're just basically running around the classroom and doing whatever. Like, what are we doing here? And she's like, oh, no. We're teaching them how to learn. Like, that's exactly what she said. We're teaching them how to learn. We're building skills so they can prompt questions and be inquisitive and learn how to learn. And I was like, oh, well, that makes all the sense in the world. Why are we not doing that everywhere? And it's because it's not what you're used to. And you can't test on it very easily. I mean, that's the other thing. So from the traditional standardized testing. You can't
test it on the truth, right? You can't test on it.
Yeah.
You got a 97% score on this multiple choice exam.
Correct. So it's actually very fascinating.
Right, and I forget who it was that said it in the exact details, but how we're working, especially with our younger team members, to understand collaboration. Well, do you know what you call collaboration in high school and college? In middle school, high school, and college? Call it cheating.
Yeah.
Well, cheating.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's trite to say, and I don't know that this would be true anymore with some of the generative AI that's out there. But the hardest test I ever took was an open book test. The hardest test I ever took. I mean, by the way, it wasn't just open book. It was like, here's the exam. Go through whatever process you want to go through, to get your answers to this. I mean, I guess I could have absolutely ripped in a cheat by having just someone else who was really good at it. Now that I'm thinking about it, damn, it didn't have to be as hard as it was. Anyway, story for another day. But like, you actually had to think. I actually had to do research. I actually had to understand what it was because it was talking about the application of this thought. But yeah, that's, if you think about it, there's only two things that determine your outcomes: decision quality and luck.
Yeah.
And the better your decision quality, the more luck will play to your advantage. Maybe we'll add work ethic into it. Okay, but decision quality and luck. Coaching is all about working on improving your decision quality. How are you making the decisions? How are you coming to choose the things that you're going to do? And there can be touches of training in that coaching of, so I guess I should have a conversation like this. Okay, let's go through what would that conversation start like? What would that conversation sound like? Now, if we're training, we're going to be looking at that conversation in more of a technical perspective, probably. Oh, no, don't say that, say this.
Right.
Whereas coaching is giving you that basis. At the end of the day, it's getting you that hypothesis so that when you take the action and you get the result, you have something to compare it to then apply and move forward. So coaching is a very, very, I hate to use the term, but it's a very, very soft discipline because, it's interesting. You need to have knowledge and experience and capability to coach in an area, but you have to be able to fight every impulse that we've been taught that the shortest distance or the fastest path between 2 points is a straight line, right? If I want to sell for every one of my salespeople, then straight line is the fastest path.
Yep.
But if I want to build an organization, a straight line is not the fastest path because you don't learn anything in a straight line.
Yeah.
And so, if you were to judge the effectiveness of coaching, it's going to be the rate of learning.
Right. Yeah.
And that's the tough part because what I just said there doesn't mean, I would say at the same time, it is, does that learning translate into whatever the performance outcome is supposed to be? And in sales, that's, sales.
Yep. So why do these terms get used so interchangeably? Like, why do we end up conflating managing, coaching, and training?
Actually, 3 reasons: fear,
Okay.
Laziness or lack of resources.
Okay, lack of resources makes complete sense to me. That makes sense. Why do you say fear and laziness? Like, how does fear play into us?
How do most people become managers in anything?
They
How does someone become the accountant?
perform well and they get promoted. They perform well and they get promoted into that position.
And so they're really good as an individual contributor.
Mm-hmm.
They've demonstrated mastery.
Yep.
Or at least upper performance. And then they now get promoted. We tend to underinvest in what is management. So, think about it. We onboard our new employees. Do we onboard our new managers?
No, we don't.
Some do, but and most of that onboarding is all about internal.
Well, and I would make the argument that also that large organizations do, but mid to small, because then it's a resource issue as
and
well.
I would say that the most large organizations, whatever onboarding to new managers, it's a lot about, okay, here's the company policies, here's this. It's not, Crotonville used to be the famous place for GE where, it was basically business school for people that were managers and coming up, where, we were teaching those processes and disciplines. But by the way, even, just because you're a manager, just because you're a top performer and you're taught how to manage doesn't mean that you're going to be a great manager. So I'll never forget the first time I had to coach third base, and yes, I said had to. Before that happened, I would never have said had to. I would,
right.
I had to coach third base in a college game, right? And I think back at it, and I'm so frustrated at myself with some of the decisions that I made. Because remember, I was the person whose job was to think through all the different scenarios and this and this. And, so our head coach, who was the third base coach, got ejected from a game. I had to go out. We had runners first and third. It was big. It was, major opponent. They would determine, whether we would have to go to a preliminary round of playoffs or we'd go right into the final round of playoffs, et cetera, et cetera. And I got out there and holy cow, I couldn't think. I won't bore everybody with the detail. So we had runners on first and third, pretty fast runner on first. We had a good hitter at the plate, and I wanted to get. And I'm thinking we got to get the guy on first to second base because 2 runs ties this game, and also if he hits a ground ball, that's double play, and we're out of and the inning's over. Well, what did I not consider? I didn't consider actually the catcher that we were playing against was the top catcher. Actually, he was first team in the conference ultimately. Good arm. And then what I also totally blanked on is we got runners on second and third, good hitter at the plate. Well, at that point, it's on, first base you'll just walk.
Right.
It's a very common move, right? And by the way, players were pissed off at me. It ultimately worked out. We lost the game, but
right.
Story for another day. But I can't believe it. And I realized I'm like, yeah, in hindsight, I should have done what I did, but I'd never. That was literally the first time that I coached third base with that team.
Right.
Right. And by the way, when it happened the next season, because he got ejected, was I that much more prepared? No, I wasn't that much more prepared because I didn't have, right. There was no opportunity to go through those things. Now we put a manager in place, right? Mm-hmm. How do we judge them? How are they measured?
Right.
Their short-term numbers are, all those things go in. So they're, when you go from individual contributor to manager, you're playing a very, very different game, and you can't control. You're always going to move to control. Now, when you go to coach, coaching is the complete, whatever the opposite of control is.
Right.
When I'm managing, I can the outcomes still matter.
Uh-huh.
When I'm coaching, I have to separate myself from the outcome.
Okay. Gotcha.
Right. I mean, so you're a good salesperson. You're a great salesperson. You're promoted to management. You became a manager because you're able to sell exceptionally. You win sales that no one else would win. You come and you see somebody and you're like, well, think about this, Jess. How many times are we like, let me just write that email for you? Not even in a sales situation. Just we look at it and we're like, let me write that email for you.
Yeah.
I'm just talking about the email, right? Coaching is, early in my years, I sent bad emails. I learned sending bad emails is bad, right? So it's scary because by the way, here's the other thing. When I'm an individual contributor and something got screwed up or something got surprised, I knew that I could recover.
Yep.
Right. I'll find something. But now I'm managing somebody else. All of a sudden I'm not generating my own opportunities. I'm not, if I lose that one, I'll pull that one out of the hat. I can't do that. So I think managing it just inherently is a scary thing. And I think that's true if you're the accounting manager, if you're the operations manager, all those things, everything that you learn that led you to be in the position to be a manager, you've got to retrain how you approach it.
Yep.
So that's why I feel.
Okay. So why laziness?
Because it's hard. And especially if you're going to talk about coaching. So where resources come to bear is I don't think every organization can have managing and coaching separated. But I'm going to tell you, if you're a manager, it is really hard to be the coach. It is really hard.
Why is that?
For two reasons. One is it's for the reason that if I'm managing and I go into a coaching mode with you for a moment, don't mistake that for coaching.
Okay.
Right? If I'm coaching and something pops up and I go into managing for a moment, don't mistake that as coaching.
Okay.
The moment you're managing, you're managing.
Yeah.
And now here's another reason. If you're one of the elements to really good coaching is to be able to separate yourself from the outcomes. And so if I'm your manager, I can't separate myself from your outcomes, especially in sales, right?
Yep.
But also, if you're my manager, then you're the one who, quote unquote, can hire or fire me. You're the one that's judging me. And so one of the things that's important for an individual that's being coached to be able to do is they have to be able to be vulnerable with the coach.
Yeah.
Right? If they can't be vulnerable, then what I say, so think about this. I'm a salesperson, and the difficulty is when I talk to this type of person, I just get nervous and I lose focus right. So you're my manager. We're in a pure coaching session. What's the likelihood that I'm going to share that with you?
Low.
Right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. Whereas now, am I saying it is impossible to be a manager and a coach? I'm not saying it's impossible to be a manager.
That was going to be my next question. Yeah.
It takes an exceptional person.
Okay.
To be able to do that. You're going to degrade the performance of both. And by the way, you're also going to confuse the person. Right? Because if you're playing, there are times, and you remember, you said this to me. Right? And I don't, one of the ways I'm able to coach you when I coach you is, you're unmanageable, so I can't manage you.
Clearly.
But is that, the good news is I can't manage, so the only thing I can do is coach sometimes. But in all seriousness, like there are times you've said to me, this is more early, but okay, wait a second. Are you managing me right now or are you coaching me right now?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And you know how, one of the things I've developed a habit to do is, I've learned, would you like a little bit of coaching right now?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because one of the things is if I'm, so we're having a conversation, which is about something and whether it's like, I don't think I think our conversations are more peerish type conversations in that point, but we're in a, collaborative discussion with some disagreement. And if I go into coach mode, all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, wait a second. I don't like what's what. So it, and by the way, what I'll tell you is coaching is hard. Coaching is hard. I think coaching is, and maybe, I bet you someone who's like a really good coach will tell me managing would be hard for them. But I can tell you, to be able to let go and separate yourself from performance, to be able to let somebody do what one of the things to be a really good coach is that idea that I do a lot of things. It's to let go. One of the things that makes being a coach hard is if I see you doing something that I think makes no sense, a really good coach doesn't have that thought.
Yeah.
And in that, if you think about my approach, I mean, I break a lot of rules about selling. There are a lot of things that I do that on the surface, you're like, you can't do that.
Right.
Except it works for me. So the difficulty that I have sometimes is I come up and I see someone doing something and I'm like, you can't do that. But if someone were to have responded to me like that, they would have killed my performance. So there's, again, it's a very, very different mindset. And I guess if you're going to be, if you're a manager and coach, whatever the measurement, whatever your key metric is, whatever your key initiative is going to determine which you trade off to.
Yep.
And in most organizations, especially on the sales side, if you're a manager and a coach, you're a manager. And so, again, coaching is harder. It's longer. You're going to get called to the carpet. The number of times that as a coach, when you're saying, well, when do we expect to see performance? The number of times that the answer is, well, that remains to be seen.
Right. Right.
So it's a much harder thing to do. So, as a coach, you have to be in the moment all the time in a coaching interaction.
Mm-hmm.
If you fall back to your standard patterns, you're going to fall out of being, you're not going to be doing good coaching. And candidly, you shouldn't do that as a manager, but you can get away with it as a manager. So I think that managing takes less of a cognitive load.
Okay. Yeah. I think that's fair.
And that's why lazy. Now, I do believe most organizations, if they looked at it, instead of combining asking managers to coach, if they really looked at it, they could either reconfigure the organization so that there is more of a pure coaching role, or that's where leveraging, and I think, especially when you're smaller organizations, I think leveraging outside organizations for that type of coaching is a great idea. People give up on it because it doesn't create measurable results. We can't attribute direct, but what that outside organization does is it hits the key thing to coaching is it separates from the performance. I don't have to live with your outcome. I'm not here to make the hire fire decision. I'm here to work with you to help facilitate you being the best you can be. Other people are going to decide, right? So it's kind of like why, in a sports analogy, I've never been a fan of the head coach who's also general manager. Right, the general manager is the manager person, right? They're the ones who are deciding on the roster. They're negotiating. There's a degree of there is an adversarial role that's inherent, right? Because I'm the rep. I want to sandbag. I'm the individual contributor. I'm naturally going to sandbag, and I don't mean that in an obvious big way, but I want to create and as the manager, I want more, right? So I ask you to tell me who are your growth accounts. You give me your list of 25 growth accounts, and I go, what about these 50?
Yeah.
Right. And by the way, you're not going to identify every growth account because you have to live with the outcome. And so you're going to help. So there's just natural incentive structures that are in there. The coach needs to be supportive. The coach needs to when the coach is responsible for the roster, it's very rare that good things happen.
Well, and I think the place where this is really hard is the coaching element, and we're going through this right now internally. The coaching element is such an investment on both sides. It's an investment on the coach, right? Because that person's not necessarily accountable for specific outcomes, and it's harder to measure. And it's an investment on your people because of the time that has to be taken to coach and allow them that growth period for the coaching to set in, which is why I think we default to management so much, because and that's something that's harder to touch, see, that so I think that's what makes it exceptionally hard. And then I think from a resource constraint, you hit on you hit on that in a myriad of places. Being able to kind of do all those things takes an exceptional person. So usually it's going to be multiple people facilitating those. All right, so I have a couple of key takeaways. I liked what you said around training is teaching and coaching is building the capacity to learn. I had never thought of it that way, but I thought that was really insightful. And then coaching, making sure you separate yourself from the outcome. We hit on that. And I think really what I heard from you overarching is when you're doing those things, you've got to make sure if you're in a management posture, you're managing and not coaching. If you're in a coaching posture, you're coaching, not managing, and the same thing. Like training is training. So kind of know your lanes and stay in your lane.
Yep, I agree.
Cool.
Well, there's our performance management topic, Jess.
I thought it was good. I enjoyed the conversation.
You know what happens in 3 days, Jess?
Another RevOps show.
We get to do it again.
Exciting.
I can tell you're excited.
I'm so excited.
Until next time, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Be sure to if you like the show, be sure to rate it. Let your friends know about it. #1 RevOps show on Spotify. Don't forget.
That's right.
We need to replace Jess's mom. She hasn't listened to it the last couple episodes.
And that's a wrap on this episode of the RevOps Show. I would second Doug's statement that this stuff is hard, or at least it can be hard. I could not imagine the confusion that comes with managing or coaching and switching between the two. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to go subscribe on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to us. Leave us a review and share the episode. If you have any questions you would like to ask Doug or Jess about performance management, email me at hannah@liftenablement.com or hit us up on Twitter @demandcreator. Until next time, remember, you can't solve your upstream problems downstream.